Welcome to the Red Chip Poker Podcast, where we share stories and strategies from the game's most fascinating minds. No matter where you are in your poker journey, there's always something new to learn. So let's get right into today's conversation with your host, Robbie Straczynski.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Red Chip Poker Podcast. I'm your host, Robbie Straczynski. And on today's episode, we have a special guest named Greg Vail. Greg is actually the resident split pot expert here at Red Chip Poker, and he's recently authored a book together with Doug Hull entitled Scoop, Big O and PLO8, Winning High-Low Concepts for the Hold'em Mind. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hi, Robbie. How you doing?
Wonderful. It's great to speak to you, especially after all this preparation I've been doing. It's nice to sort of meet the man. It's really
Thanks.
Nice. So you have been interviewed here on the podcast in the past. So we'll get to the interview's main course pretty quickly. But for those who may not be familiar with your poker history, let's just start off with an appetizer, as it were. I know you started playing poker in college during the moneymaker boom, and it became an important part of your life during those subsequent years until around, let's say, 2010. So can you maybe give us a brief history of your poker play during that period of time?
Sure. So when I went to Arizona State in 2003, my roommates and just about everybody in the dorm was fascinated with, the poker on TV thing. In the 2003, in the moneymaker boom, I'm one of those guys.
Sure.
And we were playing dorm room games, and I thought it was really cool. And I saw that somebody was called a professional poker player, and I thought it was just gambling. I didn't understand it. So when I saw that somebody could make a living for it, I just dove in, and it was just fascinated me because I knew nothing about it. I came down to college not knowing anything about it. Mm-hmm. And so we started playing, and then it took me about a year to stop losing. And then so about in 2004, I was about to break even. I started keeping records, and I was starting to break even. Right. And then in 2005, I discovered I was making 4 times more than I was making at work, and decided that work was getting in the way. And so I quit in 2005 to become a professional poker player and never looked back.
Wow.
So I started playing Limit Hold'em in 2005, and then into 2006 started discovering mixed games. I found them simply more entertaining, and then I didn't realize that I found that split pot games had a lot more skill involved and a bigger edge. Got into Big O and other mixed games 2007, 2008. And then in 2010, I actually left poker to pursue a different 2010.
Right. So, but before we get to the 2010 part, we'll get there. Gotta hit every part though. So first of all, what stakes were you playing? Was it cash games? Was it tournaments?
I never much enjoyed tournaments.
Okay.
I've played a few, but by a few, usually what people play in a month, that people are, heavy volume guys, but I've never really enjoyed tournaments. It's just not my style of poker that I prefer. I prefer lower variance things. I prefer games where I have a much bigger edge than, tournaments where you can do nothing wrong and bust out of 6 or 7 in a row. This is not my flavor. Yeah, it's not my preferred thing. I've always been more interested in making money through poker, not the thrill of it or the glory or any of that business. It's never interested me at all.
Sure, and it makes sense. Every poker player wants to try to have as big of an edge as possible. Is that actually one of the things that drew you to the mixed games away from Hold'em?
Yes, it was, and I noticed that around the 07, 08 timeframe. That when I started playing, mixed games that had, 4, 5, 6 games in the mix, that, most of these players that were playing, they played one game really well, and they played, 2 or 3 just okay, and then they played 1 or 2 just atrocious. And so I really liked that. And I really enjoyed, getting good at all these games, because I found that, I discovered that if there's in poker that there's only really 2 formats of poker. You have a 1-pot game or you have a split pot game. They're all exactly the same thing, just different formats, whether it's you're talking Omaha high low or you're talking Badusi and Badesi. It's the exact same thing. There's still a high and a high low. It's a low pot. It's the exact same thing. And I found that was not something that people understood well, and they still played all the split pot games like they played the single pot games. And that, is what led me to Big O. which I found to be one of the more advantageous games, in the full mix. And come about 2008, I was playing in some of the bigger mixed games at the Bellagio. Well, big for me at the time. We're talking 30, 60, 40, 80. I started playing in those and would meet other pros and other professionals that played only mixed games. That's all they did. And, they said the same thing, is that, they play all the games well, and they wait for the people that play 6 of the 8 games well, and the other 2 they're just atrocious at. And, I found that the winning rate was much higher than it was in Hold'em games, whether it be fixed limit or, pot limit or no limit. Well, they don't have pot limit Hold'em anymore, but they used to. So, we'd play, these mixed games, and the more Big O we had in it, I found the more money I was winning. Right. And it was rare that I don't know what happened. I discovered that, that 5th card made all the difference in the world from 4-card high-low. And I remember I went on a tear one month, I think it was summer of 2009. And I went on a tear where I found a mixed game in Phoenix, where I lived at the time. And I played something like 5 days a week for 3 months straight, and I had 2 losing sessions.
Wow.
And because this game was so wild and so crazy, when it had 7 people that saw 5th Street every single hand, I found a way to quantify all the math behind it and discover that there was a way to play this game where you would risk nothing to win something. And if you're doing that, and the edge is just astronomical. And I found that it was something that was almost overwhelming. I mean, and those 2 losses, one of which a friend got in a car accident and I left the game early. Wow. So if that counts, then have at it. But but it was, the games, when you get a game like that, it's not like Hold'em where, somebody can just rip all into you when you have the nuts and you can get drawn out on and lose. It wasn't like that. It just, if I lost a quarter of the pot or I lost half of the pot. And that was when it really clicked to me that how big of an advantage that Big O and PLO8 really had. Now, granted, this was a fixed limit game, but that's what really was the snap of the fingers, the epiphany moment for me.
Interesting. And you say, you've been playing a lot live. You played in the Bellagio. I mean, this is back before Black Friday. Were you also playing these games online, or were you an exclusively live game player?
So I did both, actually. I was approached by a friend of mine in Phoenix who was a prop for Ultimate Bet in 2006, I believe. And so he brought me on to prop for them, and I propped fixed limit 4-card high-low, so Omaha high-low, until right before that whole cheating incident came out.
Sure.
When that happened, I resigned immediately. I was furious. It was bad news. But without getting into that too much, but I played a lot online after that. When Ultimate Bet went down and my position with them was compromised, I went to Full Tilt, PokerStars, and the rest of the sites, and just played on my own rather than a prop. And so I got to book quite a few hands of Omaha high-low online, and then I would go play live pretty much after I was done playing online.
For sure. And that's the amazing thing is, that's what I was curious about, is because you can get so much more experience, so many more hands played, because there's always a game running, at least back in the day.
Oh my God, it was amazing. I mean,
you have a tremendous advantage when you get to the live tables.
Oh, absolutely. And with Ultimate Bet, their software was faster than everybody else's at the time. So, I'm propping 6 to 8 games of fixed limit high-low. We're playing 4, 5, and 6 handed at the same time. And each one of these tables whip around so fast. You're playing 150 hands an hour on each one. I mean, you get really, really good at spotting what hand wins at showdown. When you got 3 or 4 of them flashing at the same time.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
You're right. The experience level goes up much faster when you had that. And I was fortunate enough to have that situation at the time. And I know a lot of players nowadays don't have access to that, but it made a huge difference for me. And all of it, after about 2009, 2010, it really, it showed how much more skill these games had than Hold'em. I mean, everybody loves Hold'em, and I still play Hold'em. I still love it, but as far as what it offered me at the time, and it still does to this day, it appeals to me much more than a lot of the Hold'em games.
Well, certainly, but back then, just as now, game selection is pretty much the most important thing that that player needs to remember. And also, a lot of poker is just being in the right place at the right time. So you used it to your advantage successfully. So more power to you. So we did touch upon it, and let's get to this 2010. And I know that for the next 5 years, 2010 till 2015, you entered another phase of your life, serving in the U.S. Army. So first and foremost, thank you very much, Greg, for your service. Really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Really awesome. So while you were in the Army, how much poker were you able to play? While you're in uniform, and what were those games like?
It's funny you should mention that, because I entered into the Army with no intention of ever playing poker at all.
Right. I mean,
I left. I left poker in 2010. I enlisted. I left in June of 2011 for Fort Benning in Georgia for training in the infantry, and I had absolutely no intention of playing poker. I wanted nothing to do with cards. I was over the lifestyle. I was tired of it. But then I got to my first duty station at Fort Hood, and that was the first thing I was doing. It was I have time on my hands now after work. All right, let's find a card game. So
Fort Hood is Texas, right?
Fort Hood's in Texas, yes.
Also Texas, you got to hold them. Right?
Yeah. So I found a few Hold'em games. Nothing special, but it just got me back into it. But about a year later, I was transferred to Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And after about 2 years where I didn't play any cards at all because my job, I didn't have any time. But towards the end of my career, when I was out processing out of the Army, I found a bunch of home games in North Carolina, in the Raleigh area, a ton of them. And a couple of them were Hold'em. And then I mentioned, Big O and PLO8. And a couple of people pointed me in the right direction. And then I found a couple of Big O home games out in the middle of nowhere, out in rural North Carolina, and just got right back into it. And it was pot limit Big O, which at the time I had not played. So I had only played fixed limit Big O, so I had to adjust real quick.
Certainly.
But then it really started. So in that last 8 months of my Army career, when I was recovering from surgery and preparing to, disembark from an Army lifestyle, that's all I was doing, was playing cards, and I'd show up to work once and go home. So it was a good time, and so that time in the Army got me the validation I needed to say, yeah, this poker's kind of it for me, because I was playing this Big O game, and I played it for, I want to say 8 months. And I think I had 5 losing sessions total. And I played two or three times a week.
Amazing. You still got invited.
Yeah. God, they were such good people, but they just thought it was all luck. And so that game that I was playing in, that game started me down the road that eventually led to my book, because a Hold'em playing friend of mine was a fantastic Hold'em player. He was a very effective, won a lot of money playing Hold'em, but he tried to play Big O. Man, he sucked. Oh, he was bad. And he couldn't figure out why. And I'm like, you are too smart of a guy to be making these bad of mistakes on the Big O table, but why are you effective on the Hold'em table? Why does it not transfer? So at that point in time was when I started to quantify what makes the Hold'em mind effective and what makes the Big O and high-low mind effective. So I told him, I'm like, look, man, I'm going to write you a little paper to help you out. I'm going to write you a little thing that will kind of outline the concepts you need to understand. Well, that paper ended up being 35-ish pages of things that addresses the Big O mind and bridging the gap between the Hold'em mind. And it was explaining things in a high-low setting to a Hold'em player and how to bridge that gap. Right. Well, it helped him out a lot. He, did fine. I don't know if he's still beating that game or not, or whether he hasn't been invited yet, but or he stopped getting the invite. But it helped him out a lot. And then after I was done writing it, I moved back to Colorado, where I live now, and I started expanding on that. And this topic needs a little more work. That topic needs a little more work. And before too long,
for yourself,
and just for myself. And then I had a couple of other friends that had the same problem. Were great Hold'em players, but just god awful high-low players. And so I kept expanding on it. And before too long, by the end of 2015, I had a 155-page manuscript.
Wow, that were you already thinking, hey, this should be a book?
No, I never had I never had the intention of publishing it. Never once.
Huh.
And it was just something I made for my friends. And then I had a guy ask me to help him out that plays, here locally. Say, hey, can you help me out? You're pretty effective. And so I gave him this. He said it was amazing.
Right.
He's like, this thing changed my whole world.
Wow.
And so fast forward to 2017. And I went out to the series for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just randomly, it was the most random introduction. Just ran into some dude at Caesars playing a 1-2 no limit game. And I was waiting for a 2-5 game on a Monday morning, a place I should never normally would be. And, and he comes up and strikes it up in conversation and says he's a member of a group that meets every Wednesday. And I should come, introduce myself to this group. And it's a who's who in the poker world or whatever.
Sure.
And, there's people that would be interested in this manuscript. And in that audience was Doug Holm.
Wow.
And so he said something to the effect of, after my presentation, when all these people are done talking to you, you and I are going to go have a beer. I'm like, okay, that's the important offer, whatever that is. And so he wanted to help me publish this manuscript, turn it into a book.
Right.
And he wanted to bring me on board. He said he wanted to make me Red Chip Poker's split pot coach.
Yep.
And it just took off running from there. So it was, it wasn't something I set out to do. It wasn't something I set out to, hey, I'm going to turn this into a book. It's just a random meeting that got me introduced to somebody else that said, hey, we're going to publish this. And here we are.
Wow. Unbelievable. Well, When we come back, we'll explore Greg's coaching history and talk some more about his book. But first, a little strategy break.
Hello, this is Doug with Red Chip Poker, and we have the next mission in our series from Poker Plays You Can Use. The idea is these are all concrete things that you can do at the table to make your next session better. This one is based on an idea that we covered earlier, but it is the bread and butter situation. To remind you, a bread and butter situation is where you are in position with the initiative from pre-flop, and there are only one or two opponents. Now, as you saw in the last B&B mission, bread and butter mission, you were forced to pass up on some good situations because the rules were so restrictive. In this mission, your world gets bigger again. Now you are still trying to get into bread and butter situations for yourself as before. However, now you can still play other hands so long as no one else is given a bread and butter situation. Now, you can never play in a way to guarantee yourself a bread and butter situation, but you can guarantee that no one will ever get one when you are in the hand other than you. You can do this by folding or raising when out of position, or calling raises only with position. It is still against the spirit of this mission to limp. This mission is much closer to the way you should be playing normally. You will still need to pass up on calling a raise out of position with good pairs, suited aces, and other speculative hands. Eventually, these exceptions can be allowed to creep back into your range under the right circumstances. This mission will keep you out of trouble by disallowing you from playing weak hands like ace-jack offsuit out of position to a raise. Overall, these missions should have you avoiding some of the biggest leaks people have with pre-flop decisions. While you are likely playing far less hands than before, you are playing them more aggressively. Once you have accomplished this mission, you can identify why this rule is sometimes too restrictive pre-flop. Then you can start playing some of those hands with confidence, given your improved pre-flop hand selection. If you like trying these missions and want to see them all in print, you can get my Poker Plays You Can Use off of Amazon or on my own personal website, 3barrelbluff.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Robbie Straczynski here on the Red Chip Poker Podcast with our guest, Greg Vail, author of Scoop, Big O, and PLO8, Winning High-Low Concepts for the Hold'em Mind. So, Greg, let's talk a little bit more about your history as a poker coach. When did you start doing that, and what made you feel that you were qualified to coach people in the first place?
That was my first question to Doug Hall, actually. when he asked me to bring on, I'm like, what qualifies me to coach people?
Right.
And,
That's good. It's good to be self-critical like that.
Yeah, and I was like, I can't coach people. I can't do that. But, when he's like, look, this is good information. This is great. People don't know these games. You're the guy we can bring on. And so, he said he brought me on as Red Chip's coach. And I honestly, after I asked, what makes me qualified, I said, is there even a market for that?
Okay.
Is there even enough people out there that want to play Big O and PLO8 that are Hold'em players that, want to get better? Because that's a really small
unique niche. For sure.
That's not like this vast, wide market of I'll teach you poker. There's a lot of poker players, but there's not a lot of Hold'em players that play high-low, that want to get better, that play Big O, and still want to learn. Like, we're talking a very slim margin. So, I didn't think there was a market, but turns out there was. And I'm getting overwhelmed with there. I have so many people, and I love it. It's fantastic. And so I started in summer of 2017 when Red Chip brought me on board. And I started getting students immediately from Red Chip's clientele of Hold'em players that were specifically, good at Hold'em. And then they found these Big O games or PLO8, and they just were blown away. They're like, these games are so good. He's like, I don't even know what's going on in these games, but I can tell that nobody's good. I see some of these hands that are showing up. I don't know what's good. I don't know what's bad, but my God, a ton of money is going in all over the place. I'm like, yeah, Big O today is like Hold'em was in 2003. Like it's just the start of it. And there's so many people who don't know what they're doing. It's exactly the same as it was back then now.
Man, I'm seeing dollar signs now as you say that.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I started, doing the exact same thing with my first few students that, signed on with me that I did with my friend in North Carolina. Bridging the gap between the Hold'em mind and the high-low mind, and really explaining things in a way that the Hold'em mind can understand. And I break the math down. I do this in my book a lot too. That this is what a situation is in high-low. Here's how people lose their money. Now this is the math behind it. Now here's what this math would look like if it was a Hold'em hand. This hand where you flop the nut straight and check raise 7 people and moved all in, you have an 11% equity. In this situation, 11%. Now, here's what 11% looks like in Hold'em.
Something they can relate to.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is what this situation is. Here's the equal sign across the board here. This is what 11% equity looks like. So now, if you're facing a bet and 2 calls, now what's your play if this was a Hold'em hand? And they go, oh, I just check fold. I wouldn't even think about it. I'm like, okay, so why are we jamming all of our money in over here and not over here? Like it's the exact same situation. And I really see the light bulbs go off on people. And like, if you can understand the number one concept that bridges that gap between the two minds of, and this is the very first page in my book, I wasted no time. This is the first page is redefining the best hand.
Right.
And if my students can get past that one thing, they have a chance of being successful. Okay. So, and redefining the best hand means that they accept the general definition of what the best hand in poker is. And that definition is the best hand is the hand with the best chance to win, not the hand that's ahead right now, not the hand that's supposed to win, or not the hand that we think is ahead, or not that, doesn't matter. The hand with the best chance to win, given all the cards that run out. And that's just how the Hold'em brain is trained to think about the hand that's ahead right now is generally the best hand because it's got the best chance to win.
Of course, right.
It's top set against a flush draw. Okay, the set's obvious. The hard hand, the 2 pair, 1 pair hands, those are usually ahead of the draws. Granted, there are a couple situations, 2 overcards, straight draw, flush draw, all that stuff that will be a favorite, but generally speaking, our Hold'em brains are trained to think that the hand that's ahead right now is the best hand. Now in Big O, that's almost never the case. Like almost never the case, especially on the flop. So if I can get my students to first understand that the best hand is the hand with the best chance to win, they can really erase that part of their hold'em brain and then say the hand that you flop, the best hand is the hand with the best chance to win, not the top set. So like if the flop is Jack 5-4 with 2 diamonds and you have a set of jacks and somebody else has ace 2 3 6 with a flush draw, that hand, the ace 2 3 6 with a flush draw, is going to be an 80% equity favorite.
Way ahead, for sure.
Yeah, well, depending on the situation, it can be all the way down to 66 or 84, depending on the cards in play. But
hashtag math.
Yeah. So, when I show somebody this, I'm like, look, you're 79% equity dog here with this top set. And I go, look, in Hold'em, what's 79% equity look like? That's aces to kings pre-flop. So right. if you get a pair of kings in pre-flop and somebody shows you a pair of aces, would you be check raising them, or would you be moving it all in? Would you be expecting to win there? No, of course not. I'd be hoping I suck out on them. Well, that's what top set is in that example I just gave you. That set of jacks, of course, it depends on the exact cards, but
of course,
79-80% equity dog, you're 20% to win here. Well, equity, not just to win the high, but putting it all together. And so why are you expecting to win here? Why are you check raising somebody with top set here as that big of a dog? And it's like, wow, I didn't realize what the math looked like. And hey, knowledge is power. So it'll keep you from punting these chips off into the stratosphere.
Absolutely.
And then wondering why, even when you run it twice, you still lose twice. Like you're not being drawn out on. That's actually the best hand.
Correct.
And so if people can get past that, that's when a student becomes successful.
I love the methodology. It's really fantastic.
It works. It gets people to finally just click it. They're like, no, I can't accept that this is the best hand right now. If the hand ended right now, I have the nuts. Well, the hand doesn't end right now. That's not how it works. And if they get past that, they go, we have to play this hand all the way out. That's how it works.
Right. You're definitely, making it very clear the mental hurdle that they have to overcome. And it's tough when you're so used to playing Hold'em and so many, thousands, millions of hands of Hold'em. It's tough to sort of rewire your brain. But, once, like you said, that's a hump. You get over it, and all of a sudden, the road, looks nice and paved in gold.
Exactly. And the students that come to me that can get over that generally become very successful, and they go through their phases of learning very, very quickly.
Right.
And I found that the non-coachable mind, there is a poker player out there that is not coachable, no matter what. And the hurdle they cannot get over is redefining the best hand. If they can get past that, they have a chance. But there's some people out there, and I've run into a couple of them, that just simply cannot accept that the hand right now that's a mathematical underdog is not the best hand. So generally speaking, if they get past that, they're fine.
How many students would you say you've taught since summer of 2017, and how many do you have concurrently?
Oh, geez. Total, maybe 20, 25, somewhere in there.
Right.
I currently now, I think I have 11 total right now that I work with.
That's a lot to teach all at once.
Well, I mean, I'm not doing 11 calls a day, but I have a couple.
To remember where each student is in their game, and at every particular level, that's a lot to juggle.
Yeah, I have to take a lot of notes.
But that's what led to the book, as you said. It's all about note taking.
Yes, and it really helps when my students come to me and they've already read my book, because that also leapfrogs 2 or 3 sessions that they don't have to pay for.
Right.
And because I already have to teach them everything that's in the book anyway. But I have a couple students that I work with once a month, a couple that I work with once a week, and most of them I work with every other week because they have regular jobs and they don't they don't play full time. But it's been quite an adventure, and I've learned a lot doing it. It's definitely an interesting method. But with everything I've learned coaching people that are Hold'em players that are learning high-low, I definitely have come up with a system of learning for these people that to move people along in a certain way, and it seems to be working out pretty well.
Right. How do you qualify or quantify maybe success?
Well, I have a concept that I I teach my students privately that is going in volume 2 of the follow-up for this book.
Oh, that's my next question. We'll get to
yes.
volume 2.
So one of the main concepts in that book is discussing the phases of learning.
Uh-huh.
And so I've really identified 3 total phases of learning for the high-low mind.
Mm-hmm.
Phase 1, 2, and 3, that's beginners, intermediates, and professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And just about everybody that comes to me starts in phase 1. This is just learning the game, not winning yet, and moving them from a certain curriculum in phase 1 and then out of it into phase 2. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, when they get into phase 2, they're winning, not like a ton, but they're effective. They're not losing money anymore. Now they're winning enough money to like pay for coaching. And they, those are the people that, burn through a lot of hours real quickly. They're paying for their coaching. They're winning money. They're not getting yelled at by their wives anymore for losing money. And,
or husbands,
right? Yeah. Or whatever. Yeah. And then, the phase 3 is when you're a truly effective professional, and this is somebody that is winning 80% of their sessions or more. They're beating their games for 40 to 80 big blinds per hour. 40 to 80 big blinds per hour. It doesn't apply. Those normal win rates like that you're used to in Hold'em do not apply in Big O because the mathematical edge is so much greater than in Hold'em. Wow. So, if you got, a 1-2 no limit Hold'em player, they generally try to win their 10 big blinds an hour. That qualifies crushing. If you're winning 12.5 to 15, time to move up stakes.
Yeah.
That's the general standard by which we're measured.
Conventional wisdom, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Conventional wisdom as Hold'em players. So, and you got players that when you're professionals, if you're a professional game, phase 3 playing Big O player, you're probably beating 1-2 pot limit for anywhere from 140 to 160 an hour. And that's lifetime. We're not talking, hey, we had a good month and it works out to this much dollars. That's how big the advantage is in this game. It is like chess to checkers and to tic-tac-toe. It's a huge, huge mathematical advantage. And a lot of this stuff has been quantified. Amazing. So that's a lot of the aspects I teach my students once they've mastered the basics. And I really explain how we can quantify that mathematical advantage to work it into their games so that the advantage they have cannot be overcome. Like there's no method of variance that can overcome, the edge that I teach these guys in the moderately short term. We think of long term in Hold'em as what, 2,000 hours, 1 year of play. Mm-hmm. The long term in Big O, you see it after like 40 hours. It's uncanny. It's weird. It does not take long to see the real advantage because of the split pot nature. And
unbelievable.
So the split pot is what gives that advantage because you can risk nothing to win something all the time. In a one pot game, our Hold'em and high only minds, we're used to playing our equities on one pot, and if we lose, we get 0. If we get waxed with that 4% equity, we still get 0. Mm-hmm. Where in Big O and PLO8, generally speaking, if you're playing correctly, you've already got one of the pots locked up.
Yep.
And you're free rolling to the other side, or you're a massive equity favorite on both. And, we have 74% of the deck that gets us half. We have 63% of the deck that gets us the high or whatever. Well, that equates to a massive equity favorite. And it doesn't matter. You can't, it takes a lot, like an excessive amount of run bad to have that go the wrong way 5 or 6 times. It's not like Hold'em. We've all been there where we get smacked by that 20 to 1, that 13 to 1, 10 to 1. 13 times in an hour. We've all been there, But in Big O, those small equities, those 13 to 1s, 20 to 1s, those 44 to 1s, those are usually only for half. Mm-hmm. If that person gets there, they just get half the pot. They don't get the whole thing. Granted, there are some times where we are scooped by exactly the ace of clubs and exactly the deuce of clubs, and that's it. And that happens. Mm-hmm. Cool. But it's 20 to 1. So run it 20 times, you're good.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen all the time. So the thing in which people complain about is chopping the pot is the thing that actually gives you the mathematical stronghold on the game. And that's what I work with my students to actually accept that and turn it around so they can use that to their advantage. And
if there was any quote from this entire episode of the podcast, I think that's it. That's exactly what you said. What you're complaining about, the fact that you have to split the pot, that's precisely, if you get the math right, what gives you the advantage in the game. You hit it. I mean, obviously you hit it on the nail. You know what you're talking about. You wrote the book. Well, the question, you already mentioned it. So, I guess you already have plans. You released the first book in May 2018. So the second book, I guess you're halfway through, or you started writing it already?
So while I was going through the editing process for book number 1, the one that's out now, I began to develop an outline because of the question that Doug Hull asked me. He said, what percentage of your game is in this book right here? And I said, I don't know, maybe 10, 15%. He goes, can you quantify the rest of it? Sure. And so I started to write an outline for the rest of it. This book is the basics. This book will get you started. It will keep you from losing. It's not going to turn you into a professional. It's not the point of the book. It's going to keep the Hold'em players to get better and stop losing and get themselves to a point where they can become better. Mm-hmm. And it's the base of the pyramid, right? So as I started writing this outline for a second book, of volume 2, and when I started writing the outline and I came through with 25 to 30, I don't remember what the outline's at now, but of chapters of things to discuss. And I started writing it. And by the time the first book was released, I was finished with book number 2.
Wow.
So, and then I found out when I was done with book number 2, I still had half of my outline to go. I hadn't even touched it. So there will definitely be a second follow-up volume. There most likely, as a 90%, will be a third volume, and I'm debating on whether or not I want to make a mathematical-oriented volume 4. I haven't decided that yet, but there will be 2, most likely 3. I plan on finishing this in the 2019 year. I hope to release volume 2 by the end of 2019, but don't quote me or have anybody send me any mad emails if it's not available by Christmas.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the emails. That's actually, the wrap-up question here is, people have been listening. It's amazing mathematical insights that you've given us here, from Greg Vail. You said you live in the Denver area, but not all of our listeners are there. So if they do want to reach out and get in touch with you, or maybe they want to go ahead and get coached, or they have any questions, so where and how can they reach you?
Well, most of my students don't live in the Denver area, actually, right. So it's pretty good. But the best way to get a hold of me is through email. Mm-hmm. And my direct email is gregvailpoker@gmail.com. It's first name, last name, poker@gmail.com. And I usually
is VAIL.
EAIL, like the ski town in Colorado. No relation, unfortunately. I wish there was. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. And I do individual coaching. I do not do like short sessions or little tips or tricks with sessions. Hey, a 1 hour pick your brain. I don't do that. I take committed students who their main goal is that I'm going to sign on and I'm going to learn the professional game. So I take students and I turn them into high-low professionals. I don't mess around with a couple hours here and there or, pick your brain stuff. Every one of my students is committed to learning, and generally speaking, they stay on for a long period of time. I have some students, guys, it's on this 50th hour, 60th hour or something like that. They really stick around for a while as long as they're committed and really have a desire to learn.
Right. And you, like you said, you never stop learning, whether you're the student and even as the teacher, you just never stop learning. And one thing you did mention just earlier is, anyone who's already read the book, you've already, saved yourself quite a bit. So, can't recommend it enough. It's Greg Vail, author of Scoop, Big O, and PLO8, Winning High-Low Concepts for the Hold'em Mind. You can buy it now on Amazon. And Greg, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. But don't stop learning now. Head over to redchippoker.com. You'll find everything you need to get better today. Join our free, friendly strategy group and to start talking poker with our coaches and community. And listen, if you're ready to take poker more seriously, sign up for Core, our $5 a week complete training platform. built for players who have limited time to study. Core is packed with over 100 bite-sized lessons, from the fundamentals to advanced strategies, quizzes, achievements, discussion threads, and more. And for the bravest of heart, we invite you to check out our Pro membership, which includes 24/7 access to hundreds of videos, all of our playlists, all of our crash courses, and more. If you want to see what the top 1% of players are studying to keep their edges razor sharp, visit redchippoker.com/Ruby. That's RUBY, and get a special deal on your first 3 weeks. Until next time, run good, play better, and get there.